Amarone classico Costa Sera.
Amarone classico Costa Sera Masi. In the nose, it fascinates and intrigues with its complexity. Already in the nose, it's clear that this is an important wine, a wine with extraordinary depth. The notes in the nose are those of potpourri, of dried flowers. Then we have a spicy note, typical of, especially found in the Corvina grape. In this case, we already have pepper, black pepper, dark fruit, a ripe cherry in the nose. In the mouth, a rich, generous wine, dark red fruit. This cherry almost soaked in alcohol. We have a hint of tobacco. The persistence is very long. We're talking about a wine of 15 degrees alcohol, although you don't feel those 15 degrees in the mouth. Since one of the winning properties of Amarone, which earned it the nickname of Gentle Giant, is that all of its complexity and alcohol content, once in the mouth, is extremely gentle. This is down to the drying process, the appassimento, lending it a tactile perception in the mouth, a velvety and soft sensation.
E soffice.
For all wines, time is a vital element, as the vine needs time to go into production. Wine needs time to ferment. It needs time to age in wood and so on and on. At this point, there is this extra component where you give the grapes time to over-ripen. Grapes are usually picked, like all fruits, picked and used fresh as soon as they've been harvested. Here, on the other hand, time makes it possible to further ripen the grape beyond the vegetative state, when it's on the plant, I mean. And it isn't only the ripening, but also enzymatic variations within the grape, producing new elements which don't belong to the original grape, but are in fact born with time.
How much is time worth? The one before us, the one after us, and the time we're living in.
Corvina is the only grape which, when cut from the plant, has more than 500 elements. In short, that are still alive and which continue to stay alive for a long time thereafter. And these are what then develop into secondary and tertiary aromas of great appeal. That's why then, how time in this case not only creates what everyone calls concentration, because part of the water inside goes away, whatever fruit you have, it withers, the flower withers. But in this case, it withers well, in the sense that it changes its aromatic connotations.
This gentleman is Sandro Boscaini, the president of Masi Agricola, and part of the 6th generation of a family who's been producing wine for a long time, 250 years to be exact. What we're going to discuss today is its history. But above all, it's the story of a company and a wine that made the culture of the time the key to its success. My name is Matteo Caccia, and welcome to the Magic of Time, 250 years of Masi.
When I was at university, we always went out with friends for a drink in the evening. And up near the Catholic, down in Marigi Street, there was this bar that no longer exists today. You could enter it, and there was this large room, and there were these 3 barrels with writing on them. Vin Char, Vin Scur, and Vin Gros. That was the beginning of the 60s, you know. The law regarding designations of origin was still yet to come. And back then, this was the only Italian enology. Vincia, which was the Venetian wine, the wine from these parts. Vinscur, which was the Piemontese wine, Nebbiolo, Barbera. And the Vin Gros, which was the dense one, the ones that came from Puglia or Sicily. This was the idea of Italian enology, 3 types of wine. White wine wasn't even mentioned because it was too difficult to keep, and you'd have to buy some bottles, wine that was already bottled. So wine you'd get from the taverns, and that's if they had it. All in all, that was how we considered Italian enology. We've come a long way since then.
Sandro Boscaini, better known to everyone as Mister Amarone, is the man who helped change the way Italians see and above all taste wine, starting from those 3 definitions up to what Masi wine represents today. Although it seems obvious now, it wasn't always that way.
It wasn't like that before. I must say that Amarone was almost considered an accident you'd have at home. They used to say, "The ricciotto is running away." When I was a child, I would hear my father, who was a technician, and the farmers would say, "Mi scappa il ricciotto." The ricciotto is running away. Where did it run to? How does it manage to do it? It doesn't even have legs. And so my father would say, "Pour some out, add some sulfur, maybe you can stop it." Why? Because ricciotto, by its very nature, must be sweet. It must have a lot of sugar. Alas, wine, on the other hand, always tend to continue in its fermentation, which is the transition from sugar to alcohol. So, to stop this fermentation, you need to have a very sugary grape. And the one that comes from drying is sugary. But afterwards, you have to make sure that by keeping it cold, for example, you avoid continuing the fermentation. And this is how Ricciotto was born, which by its very nature is the father of Amarone, but it remained sweet and was drunk like that in the years past.
When I arrived in Valpolicella to learn about and tell the story of Masi, I had done my research on Amarone. But as I expected, many things would be discovered once I physically got there.
It's a modern wine with an ancient heart. In my opinion, this is the perfect definition that can be given. Modern wine? Why? Well, because it's a likable wine, a wine everyone likes. It's a wine that has this illusion of sweetness, let's say, that a structured canonical wine does not. Yet, it's a wine that sits among the strongest of wines. Wine that can easily reach 16 degrees and a half. It's a wine that has this enormous capacity for aging. That is, it truly has the character of a strong wine, an important wine, a complex wine. Here in Europe, people appreciate how wine can carry the characteristics of the land. It's inherent in the true European drinker to understand that wine is local. Barolo must have certain characteristics, Brunello di Montalcino, Chianti, others. And Amarone must have its own characteristics. In America, it was more difficult to make people understand this because they are, well, I like it or I don't like it. So what is it they really like? They like strength married to a fruitiness. And Amarone has it in abundance. You make love to it immediately. When you put it in your mouth, it's persuasive.
I'm extremely interested in geography, so in my opinion, at the beginning, it's absolutely necessary to contextualize where you work, where you're present. And once you're there, you can get an idea of what's been done in those lands, or at least I hope that I find myself dealing with a basic understanding of them. And then, of course, there's the person who I am, and what I have to offer, in this case with good wine. My name is Giacomo Boscaini. I've been working for Masi since 2013. After various courses in marketing and in-depth studies on the world of wine, I currently deal with our foreign market, foreign trade, in the role of both export manager and brand ambassador, depending on the opportunities and occasions.
Giacomo is Sandro's nephew, the son of his brother, Bruno, and as such represents the 7th generation of the family.
Abroad, at the moment, we do about 70% abroad, 30% in Italy. But the percentages have changed in recent years as we've been investing a lot on improving our internal market. But this is a particular question, because people often say, 70% foreign, so are you doing everything abroad? No, hang on. 70% abroad means 130 countries in the world. Therefore, 30% of the Italian market means that, in fact, it's almost one of our most important markets. Canada has been the main one for several years now.
So I've just arrived here in Valpolicella. The Boscaini family welcomed the whole team and I in an incredible location. The Cerago Alighieri estate, a place that, through direct lineage, belongs to Dante Alighieri's successors. I'm just about to arrive at the Cerago Alighieri estate. It's an incredible place, almost out of this world. There's a long avenue of cypresses that leads right up to a bright stone farmhouse that was built in 1353. We're surrounded by vineyards and beauty everywhere. And everything here speaks to the passage of time, how time passes slowly and how, at times, seems to almost come to a stop. And these vineyards are nothing like any others. Sandro Boscaini tells us why.
Yeah, the term cru is untranslatable. It's a French term that I don't know what, but it doesn't exist. You can't find it in a dictionary. If there is, cru means vineyard, but even that's incorrect. What cru actually means is a vineyard that has pedoclimatical characteristics, but not only that. It's a vineyard planted with certain grape varieties and grown in a particular way. So the cru is the soil, but it's also the finished product. So you have a finished product that has its own history, a history linked to the man who makes it, etc., etc. There'd never been a concept like this in Italy. Yes, there was the concept of a wine estate, like here in Cerago Alighieri, or in Tuscany, the great estates of the nobles, etc., which obviously have a very strong characterization of the family style of making wine, or even the style of an enologist who creates their own wine. In Italy, perhaps my father was the first to have this concept. But right here in Valpolicella, making Ricciotto and Amarone, well, some vineyards are better than others.
Even if it's untranslatable, the Treccani dictionary says that the term cru, in the enological vocabulary, indicates a specific area, the exclusive producer of a wine. Strictly speaking, it means a vineyard that is part of an area capable of producing wine with particularly valuable organoleptic characteristics. And Sandro Boscaini has made an important contribution to all this.
Well, I mean, yes, I think I've made a good contribution. Now, it seems a little over the top to say it because there are many companies who've made the name Valpolicella world famous. But after having made Valpolicella respected from an enological point of view, I must say that perhaps the most important contribution I've made was with Amarone. Saying Valpolicella means knowing how to make good wines, but it really means knowing how to make extraordinary wines. Wines that can be enjoyed and compared with the greatest wines in the world. Certainly with the greatest Italian wines, there's no doubt about it that I carried this message. But not just this message, I brought the bottles and uncorked quite a few too.
Di recente finalmente sono...
By the way, Sandro, recently our old vintages have finally arrived with our customers, tonight especially, at the Ritz London. We've been working on it, I personally had been working on it, for 3 to 4 years now. And the cases have finally arrived physically at the Ritz London, at the restaurant, which I believe has 1 or 2 Michelin stars. And we are going to do a whole wine page, a list of 10 vintages of Costa Sera at the Ritz London. This for me was a really important goal, a goal we've worked on diligently through contacts, through relationships and friendships. So not just work. Last week, I got the photo from the sommelier who was unpacking our wooden cases of older vintages, ranging from the 80s up to recent vintages.
Giacomo's generation represents the future of the company. And given that time is important for Masi, the past and in the future, their eyes are already pointed towards a new horizon. And when he talks about wine, Sandro Boscaini knows what he's talking about.
I think this is the Amarone of the future. What I mean is keeping it a little under control, but in a very natural way. All this, and well, its excess of fatness and sweetness, and giving it instead a much more reflective wine, a little more in line with the world's greatest wines. So how is this done? Once again, it's done through time. Don't be afraid if the fermentation lasts a little longer and it eats up a little more sugar. Don't be afraid if you need maybe an extra year of aging in the bottle afterwards. But when you pour it out, it's a world-class wine. Perfect. And this leaves us with a wine that I like to call the postmodern Amarone, the Costa Sera Riserva. A wine where we've added a booster, as they say today, which unfortunately is back in fashion. Here we've also added a particular grape, 10% of Ozzoletta, a grape redeemed from oblivion. Why? Because it's a more austere, more tannic grape, and it gives it lends it towards this characteristic of greater, let's call it austerity, greater seriousness. You can say it doesn't need a lot of makeup to be seen out in public.
Di tanto make-up per farsi vedere in pubblico.
Moving to Tuscany, I had the opportunity to taste some Amarone, in particular Masi's Costa Sera, and I was very impressed by this wine, which is very attractive, very full in the mouth, and then ends in a drier way, very elegant, and this fascinated me. I wanted to know more. Where's this Valpolicella? I took my first trip to get to know this landscape a little bit better, and Valpolicella is really beautiful, and its wines are marvelous. After 2 or 3 days there, I wanted to meet the man who brought Amarone to the world stage. This man is Sandro Boscaini. My name is Kate Singleton. I'm a journalist and a writer. I write books mostly about all matters relating to wine. For many years, I've written for the International Herald Tribune about wine too. And more recently, I focused on the wines of Sicily, the area of Tuscany between Montalcino and Montepulciano, and more recently, Amarone.
This is the story of Sandro Boscaini, Mister Amarone, who made the extraordinary Amarone phenomenon possible. Without his vision, his courage, his energy, and communication skills, the symbolic wine of Italian excellence would still be a curiosity, confined to the beautiful hills of Valpolicella. This is what Kate Singleton writes in the preface to her book, rightly entitled Mister Amarone.
It's a name that was given to Sandro Boscaini by the wine world long before I met him. When we met, he told me how he used to present these wines made with grapes that no one had ever heard of. They weren't made from Cabernet Sauvignon or Merlot, instead Corvina, Molinara, varieties most people had never heard of, right? And he was so rightly convinced of the value of these wines that when his colleagues and others tasted them, they gave him the name Mister Amarone.
The great skill of Sandro Boscaini has long been his excellence in production, as well as knowing how to present wine equally well in Italy and throughout the world.
My first trip to Asia was, I think, in '97. I accompanied my father that time, and since then I've always made 1 or 2 trips a year to Asia. In Japan, almost every year, but I've also been to China, several times to Vietnam, Cambodia, Singapore. I've been around most parts, a bit all over Korea.
Her name is Alessandra Boscaini, the sales director at Masi Agricola and Sandro's daughter.
And yet I still have this incredible memory of my first trip to China. We'd been to Beijing and there were no cars there, very rarely, all bicycles. Of course, we didn't have an importer back then. It had all been through a particular connection at the Kempinski Hotel in Beijing. The food and beverage manager was from Verona and wanted to create a sort of festival on the theme of Venice and for the Kempinski clients. And so he called us, and somehow we got hold of a disused gondola to do the staging. I imagine this gondola is still around China somewhere. And we organized evenings, presenting our wines. Of course, you weren't addressing the Chinese clientele back then, but more so an international clientele who frequented the hotel. But it was really exciting to see China as it once was. All their Mao Zedong clothes, all grey. Returning there 2 years later, it changed completely.
Talking about her first trip to the East, Alessandra mentioned a gondola that they had brought from Italy to China. Except that she said it as if it were the most normal thing in the world to do. If you want to promote Italy and your brand, you leave on a gondola. So, obviously, I asked her father to tell us more about it.
I had this opportunity. One of the first Western hotels in China, in Beijing, the Kempinski Hotel Beijing, had hired 2 people from Verona. One was a chef and one a maitre d' of a hotel. And together they opened a restaurant called Gondola. Well, I was introduced to one of them, the maitre d', and I asked him, "Sorry, but why can't you get some wine there?" And he said, "I don't know. I'll talk to the director. I'll see what I can do, etc., etc." And then I had an idea. I'm going to send you a real gondola. You're going to have the real thing. And after that, we'll see. But you know, you'll also have to cover the transport costs and so on. So he said, "I'll be delighted to cover those costs. So let's do this. Let's do a week of cuisine with Venetian wine, and I'll send you over the gondola." And in fact, I went to Venice one day and my brother Sergio called me. "You're not here, where are you?" "I'm in Venice, buying a gondola." He couldn't believe it.
Ci sei? Dove sei? Ho detto, sono a Venezia a comprare una gondola. Non ci credeva.
I bought a used gondola and then I phoned them or wrote them up. I don't remember which. I think there was telex back then. And I said, "Look, in order to send the gondola on its way, because it's 11 meters 60 long, the gondola fits about 600 cases of wine. You have to buy those." And then I say, "If we come over there, we can do it with a chef. We can do all this food and we can sell it with this wine." Then we agreed on the deal and sent the gondola on its way. And I went down, I took a chef from here, Chef Ferron, Gabriele Ferron, the risotto guru of Isola della Scala, and we did this festival of Veronese cuisine, risotto of course. We took risotto to China, yeah. Later, he even did the same thing on the Great Wall of China, and it was very successful. After that, I had to leave, but they held onto the chef for another 10 days. And like that, I found an importer, almost at once.
The other great skill of Sandro Boscaini isn't simply taking Masi wine beyond Valpolicella, beyond national borders, but also knowing how to bring people who live far away right here to his very home, or in any case, close to his wine.
Then we also had Bill Gates, who came here to Serrego Alighieri. He met the Count, had a tasting. Also, we had Donald Trump, let's say ante litteram, before he became president. He had attended the tasting that Raffaele Boscaini held in the United States.
Her name is Cristina Valenza, the Communications and Public Relations Manager at Masi Agricola.
Some time ago, they asked us about our Amarone, which had an ecclesiastical destination, and therefore, if we had understood correctly, was it going to the Vatican and therefore the Pope? So that really was an exceptional recipient.
It's a wine with an ancient heart. Why? Because its production method is ancient. It was known at the time of the Romans. It was drunk back then due to necessity. At that time, wine required a high grade of alcohol, a high concentration in order to last from one year to the next. Technology was the real problem. How could they store it over time? And how could the wine be kept that way without it turning into vinegar? Well, to keep it from turning into vinegar, there were very few methods. Either you added honey, for example, or resin, as they still do today. Less and less, of course. But they still do it in Greece with retsina. Or you increase the concentration. How do you do that? Well, through time, of course.
And once again, the theme of time returns every time we talk about the wine here, and every time we talk about the work of this company. Time and its enormous value.
For me, the real value of time is savoring the moment we live in. If we can find pleasure or joy in the moment we're living, this has far more value than searching for a tomorrow that we might not see. Even in the field of wine, time not only has importance in choosing the right time for the harvest, for the pressing, and for the drying time in the case of Amarone, but also in the bottle itself. One can uncork a bottle at the right time and it's perfect, but if you uncork it too early or too late, it's no longer at its peak. So time is crucial to all these aspects.
A superior class, you either have it or you don't, right? Then you have to present them. Well, a saying comes to mind, a Venetian saying perfect for this. Savoir faire et faire savoir. Knowing how to do it, but also knowing how to talk about it. And that's why I'm here to talk about it with you.
The story of the Masi wines has just begun. So sit back and enjoy the tale of the Boscaini family. In the next episode, you'll learn all about a forefather named Giobata, who would go out to the Vallo dei Masi every day to cultivate the vineyard, and all his successors down the line for 8 generations to the present day. And the 9th generation is just about to start.